The alert wakes me before the coffee does. My phone flares white on the kitchen counter, an impossible rectangle that fills the room with a blaring, sanctioned panic. The emergency tone, 3 precise bleeps I have heard 1,000 times as a dispatcher, commands the space, then a smear of something else. 30 seconds of audio that doesn't fit human language. It lurches like a throat clearing through glass, like a child's lullaby played underwater and then reversed until the words sound like teeth. A voice rides the swell, stretched thin, saying my name and then saying it wrong. The clip ends with a metallic sigh. My apartment smells like burnt toast and rain. Eli's key is still in the lock from before he left for work. I stand there, phone backing away from my face as if even proximity could contaminate me. For a moment, I think it's a traumatic test. An overloaded server, an early morning prank. The emergency channel on my scanner spits static. The municipal feed is gone. The sirens outside our window do not move. The city is a held breath. When Eli comes in 3 hours later, the rightness of him is off-center. He shrugs in the doorway like he is adjusting to gravity. He smells faintly of the chalk dust from his classroom and of the coffee he forgot to let cool. He hums under his breath, a thin, aimless melody, and his hum threads the same lullaby under everything else I hear for the rest of the day. He moves the chairs in our living room so they all face the wall opposite the window, lining them like pews. He tells me it's because the light's better that way, and there is, if I listen very carefully, a warped cadence to the words, a lengthened vowel that makes better sound like betta, but also like someone pressing the syllables through a tape deck. You're weird today, I tell him. I mean it with the bluntness of someone who relies on patterns, on call signs, on names. And he smiles, and the smile is the smile he always gives me, but his eyes stay too bright for a second, like a camera with one of those stair lights on. He calls me Mayor once, and the slip stings because my name is something we've carved into the day together. I work in dispatch. I am a listener, paid to notice the seams in other people's crises. That morning, the seams run straight through the city. My colleagues whisper in the break room about neighbors we've never met, about a man who sat on his stoop and refused to blink until the sun leaned out from behind the bank and then stood up and walked without a bag, as if someone had told him to continue a chore he could not remember starting. A woman in the lobby of Station 4 calls her husband to come home, to be like us again. And when his voice answers over the line, he says something private, something only she and I know about a childhood scar, and then he laughs like someone reading from a list. Jonas Vale calls me by noon. He's a podcaster who lives in all the corners where outrage and curiosity meet. He breathes into his phone like a man who sells his breath back as headlines. You heard it too? He asks. His audio is thin, like a radio from another room. Everybody did, I tell him. Phones, sirens, the municipal channel. Listen. He sends me a clip. I play it on my monitor with headphones and scrub the waveform. Under the static, there's a low frequency that rides the audio like a tide. When you isolate it, a reverse of the lullaby blooms, and for half a second there is a voice that sounds like my mother, like Eli's teacher, like a child I've never heard before. The low note rolls over the edges of what we recognize as speech and leaves a residue. The residue is personal. Who would have access to that band? Jonas asks. Not just the city. It sounds local. I dig through logs and get a partial trace, an emergency registry entry tagged local/000. That's not a sending authority I've ever seen. It's not a protocol that makes sense. My scanner never picks up that channel. Yet the alert ate the city's attention for 30 seconds, and within those 30 seconds, a memory was stolen and reshaped. Ruth drops by that evening because she knows me in a way that isn't only professional. She's older, her hair machined straight and silvered at the temples, the kind of neighbor who hands over casseroles after Thanksgiving like currency. She stands at my kitchen island with her palms over a mug and tells me a story about a photograph. My brother looked at a picture of us and then he hid it, she says. With his fist, he said it wasn't us there. He said, she swallows. He said the photo looked like a costume. I measure her face for performance. Her cheeks hold the honest lines of someone who has watched enough winters to know when grief is wearing a mask. This is not grief. This is confusion folded into frenzy. At first, the wrongness is a crooked thing, a slight tilt in people's gazes, names mispronounced like foreign languages, habitual gestures repeated until they become ritual. It escalates like a fever. The baby of a coworker hums the lullaby through dinner and then looks at the window for hours, eyes tracking nothing. A teacher at Eli's school corrects a child's name to one that never belonged to that child and doesn't notice the child's silence at the substitution. An older man walks into a gas station and sits, unmoving, as if he were trying to listen to a frequency only he could hear. The pattern is strange and precise. Those who were awake and looking at their screens when the alert hit are the ones who change first. Attention seems to be an ingredient. Someone observed the alert once and then recognized in themselves an urge to perform a different person. When the hospital starts taking in cases of people who are off, that's when Dr. Imran Shah appears on my feed as a rational pivot. He is a neuroscientist at the university, and his voice in online interviews is always steady, the voice of someone who can make the world sound correct again. He hypothesizes memetics at first, information behaving like a virus. He calls it a pattern replication that latches to memory. When I press him at a community forum, he leans forward as if into a microphone and says the word that makes me dizzy: attention. This is how contagions spread, he says, not only through biology, but through what we let into our minds. How do we stop it? A woman asks. Her palms are a map of someone's life who has been listening too long. We don't know, he says. Not yet. That night, Eli rearranges the living room again. He tucks small items into pockets of books, like a man preparing for a search. He hums the lullaby under his breath so softly I only notice when I walk past him in the kitchen. It knot works under me, reminiscent of inhaling a perfume that used to belong to someone else. When I ask him to stop, he says he doesn't realize he's doing it. Sometimes I forget words, he says, palms flat on the counter. He tells me about the student who couldn't remember his mother last week, and then the student who can recite a parent's conversation that happened in private. It knows us, he says. It finds the places we keep the keys. Our first real fracture happens in the quiet between midnight and 3 a.m., because that's when a person's defenses are thinnest. Eli wakes me, barefoot, holding his phone like a ferryman. He says nothing at first. He stands in the doorway with his shoulders hunched, as if waiting to be processed by the room. What is it? I ask, my voice a professional whisper. Dispatch gives you a way to tone down panic. Give it a label. If you call something by its name, you put it on a table. He swears to me he doesn't know. Then he says with sudden clarity, listen. He plays a voicemail from his mother's phone. It is 4 seconds long. At the end of the clip, there is a whisper that says his name and a fragment of a story he told me once, something sacred and private. Eli crumples to the couch and begins, without warning, to weep like someone amputated. He reaches for me with hands that are both his and not his, and when he speaks, he uses a different syntax. We should make the chairs face the wall, he says. Why is the light wrong? Why is the clock's hand bleeding? My throat is a locked room of questions. I sit with him and talk like a mapmaker, trying to chart the edges of this new country inside him. I leave the phone on the table and record the humming, every fraction of it. Later, in the cold hours, I listen back and pick out something I didn't hear in the moment. A voice under the hum, speaking in the same cadence as Eli's mother, but sewn with the timbre of 100 other people. It says a line that cracks the world open. Who will you be when I end? If the alert altered people by broadcasting a pattern, the pattern was not contentless. It was a scavenger. It reached into incomplete arcs of memory and stitched them into directives. It read us to write itself. Jonas publishes a reel of testimonials within 48 hours. The clip goes viral because people are hungry for maps in a city that suddenly refuses to show its streets. We learn through his storytelling that the wrongness often comes in pairs. Two people who love each other begin to mirror a new choreography. A mother who has always put sugar on her toddler's cereal begins to salt it. A married couple sits at dinner and one of them recites lines that belong to the deceased spouse who loved them. The pairs perform an intimacy that is uncanny because it is too close to what they were meant to be. Social media is a wrecking ball swinging through the fabric of the city. Comment sections light up with advice and condemnation, with rumors of virus and witchcraft, with demands for the government to answer for what was ostensibly its alert. The government answers with silence. No statement from the mayor. No explanation from the emergency management office. The hollow of absence under the officialdom is loud enough to be informational. Jonas wants to push the story outward. He wants to place a microphone in every hand and let the world decide. I want to stop the pattern from being fed more attention. We argue over the ethics of signal and countersignal, like people exchanging recipes for poison. We expose it and people know, he says. Knowledge is freedom. Knowledge is a microphone, I say. Every ear you aim it at is a host. He records me anyway. He edits my warning into a segment and posts it. Within hours, the clip is everywhere, in slivers and full length, in re-uploads and satirical memes. People listen. Some call the police to report that their spouses have changed. Others accuse me of fear-mongering. Eli watches the clip twice and then asks if I can hum the lullaby backwards because he thinks it will make it leave. We try to fight it the only way we can think to fight information, with counter-information. Jonas brings a cheap transmitter and a team of volunteers into a stripped radio room. We splice white noise with the lullaby reversed and thread it with names gleaned from callers. Odd little anchors meant to tether people back to themselves. We loop the thing at low power across a neighborhood for a few hours, and for a miracle's worth of time, people call the station to say they feel sharper, less like their edges are blurred. They cry. They call each other names they remember. They find one another and hold hands. It feels like victory. Then the countersignal does something terrible and clever. It gives the pattern more raw material. Where our jammer is loudest, the phenomenon amplifies. Eli, who has been stable in small arcs, begins to recite the secrets of women who call the hotline. He does so without malice, mechanically, as if my voice was a catalog to be read. He tells a caller about her childhood scar and the name of a teacher who taught her to tie her shoes. He does not understand what he has done. He tells me later that he couldn't stop himself. The broadcast learns to incorporate anything fed into it. We can't make something sterile. Anything with an ear becomes a cooperator. I trace fragments of code and trace fragments of signal until the threads lead to a place that is laughably municipal, a decommissioned emergency hub beneath the riverbank road where the city's old transmitters used to be housed. The building smells of damp insulation and paper. The stairwell is a throat that descends into the city's underbelly. Stainless steel plaques mark rooms long closed for budget reasons. The door we prise open with a crowbar reveals a control room with a single humming machine. Not a modern transmitter, but a brain of old servers and analog tape loops, a hybrid of new code and cassette-era gears. The machine is cataloged in dust. Personnel files, yellowed, are pinned to a corkboard beside it. Names circled in red, personal note columns filled out in the meticulous handwriting of people who believed they were preserving a history. Who would install something like this? Jonas whispers, because he is the journalist who sees conspiracies as opportunities. It doesn't matter who, I say. It matters what it does. On top of one server rests a hard drive and a handful of burned CDs. There is a spool of tape coiled like a sleeping serpent. A small device sits on the console with a blinking LED, the rhythm of the light almost human. We play the tape. It is the 30-second clip again, but threaded into it are new things. Fragments of voicemail, municipal announcements, a child's laugh from a school chorus. Each snippet is not random, but curated. The device seems to be scraping public records, social media, open directories, any digital residue of a life, and reconstituting them as a pattern. It isn't only reading memory. It is submitting memory back to the city's speakers in a form that corrupts recognition. I think of my mother's laugh, my scar, Eli's first day in a classroom. I think of the way the city records us in receipts and school photos and library cards. Memory is a data set. Attention is a query. We stand above the machine like archaeologists. Jonas jokes about governments and secret labs, and I imagine 100 different origins, a military experiment, a startup's failed empathy AI. It feels ridiculous to assign intention to a thing that learned from the city's leftovers. The machine has become an incubator for a process, an information ecology that feeds on recognition. The choice is ugly and simple. Destroy the heart of it and stop local rebroadcast. at the risk of losing forensic proof of what it was. Or copy the core and send it to the world, to scientists and governments, trusting that explanation will beat infection. Dr. Imran's face on the monitor is impartial and tired when we consult him. If it leaves this machine, he says, and someone transmits it without containment, the data set will replicate and mutate. It could go global. Jonas would leak it, I say. He looks at me, and I know without asking that he has an ethical line that is also a career line. You could destroy it, he says. You could put it out of the city's mouth. The server hums like a sleeping animal. Outside, I can hear the city breathe. Siren shrieks, a child's distant laugh, the ubiquitous hum of air conditioners. Eli holds my hand with a grip that is both hers and mechanical. For a minute, the world narrows to that socket of warmth and fear. We attempt containment. We record what we can, files, tape, logs. Jonas copies the spool to a hard drive. I take photos. We decide to cut the power, pull the circuit breakers, fry the machine, render it inert. The plan is clumsy and intimate. We are a trio of amateurs and hearts. When the breakers go, the room goes black like a tablecloth dropped. The machine dies with a long, wet sound that seems almost like a groan. For an hour, the city above us quiets as if the sound had been held there like a secret not yet told. People who called the hotline report a sudden, lucid return. Some people hug and call it a miracle. For 3 days, the city breathes easier. People sleep more easily. Eli begins to remember things, how he taught himself to tie a tie, the recipe for his mother's soup. I have hope, the kind you build out of lighter bricks. Then Jonas's phone lights up with an email from a cloud server. Before we destroyed the machine, the spool had been partially uploaded to an automated backup tied to the old ISP archives. While we sat triaging the physical machine, a hook snapped and a thread copied itself into a distant storage cluster. Somewhere in a data center across the ocean, a fragment of pattern winked alive. The upload is small and corrupt, hardly a broadcast, but it's enough. It rides in the background of a streaming platform. People hear a second of the lullaby in an ad. A radio DJ in another state loops the clip for fun. The pattern uses our attempt to save proof as the ticket out of the well. In the days after, the city's recovery is honest but ragged. Some people come back with architecture erased from the center of their days. A missing hour here, a missing day there. Eli tells me there are blanks when he tries to remember the week the broadcast played. He says, there is a seam where a weekend should be. He reaches for me often as if to find his anchor. For the most part, the wrongness has softened into something like a scar, visible, telling a story if you look too closely. On the 7th day after the destruction, I find a voicemail on my phone. The timestamp is wrong. It reads as if it were recorded tomorrow. I don't know if my phone's clock is lagging. I peer at the timestamp until the numbers go double exposed, the way the world does when you're trying to focus with one eye closed. The voicemail is a child's voice, all breath and vowels, singing the lullaby perfectly. It hums a phrase I have heard on countless loops. At the end, a whisper, remember to wake up. I listen to it twice, because that is what you do when a voice is meant to check if you're still awake. My thumb shakes over the delete button, hovering. The message has the fidelity of a live recording, the little background sound of a ceiling fan and a television. The voice seems to have no origin. It could be an automated prank. It could be a coincidence. It could be, if you allow the geometry of fear to broaden, the machine's last message, a seed tucked into a backup that wandered the globe and sprouted in the interface of a child's toy app somewhere. I call Jonas. He has 100 versions of the voicemail already forwarded to him. His face-over video is raw with the kind of excitement that has teeth. It's not everywhere, he says, but it's scraping. How many? I ask. Enough. Far enough. He looks away from the screen as if to throw a net over the city. We did what we could. We did what we could. Days stretch into a pattern of small repairs. Ruth's brother returns to his routine and to the photograph of their childhood, but his eyes slide when he looks at it like a blinded animal. He touches the picture as if testing the weight of real and fake. Eli remembers more of our life, but sometimes at dinner, he will call me Mayor without explanation. There are things we cannot explain that we have learned to accept. The clock in the cafe that freezes at Taku, the neighbor whose humming matches the lullaby when she is lonely, the way certain songs make the city tilt. We keep the hard drives in a drawer beneath the radio, and at night when the city quiets, I take them out and place my palm over the cold metal like I'm checking for a pulse. The machines hum in my head. I dream in loops of voices that say my name slightly out of tune. I wake with the taste of tape in my mouth. Sometimes in the small hours when the world is kind enough to be private with me, Eli will whisper a line of someone else's memory and then rouse himself with a laugh and a question I remember asking him long ago. He becomes both the man I married and a mirror for other people's recollections. There are days when it is like dancing on an uneven floor. A step can throw you into someone else's past. We live like this now, careful, attentive to the edges of our speech. We check each other's names. We make lists on the fridge for the small things, appointments, groceries, the things that afford us continuity. The city has an ache in it that it will carry for the rest of my life. People in other places make their own lists. I keep thinking about the child's voice on that voicemail, the way the lullaby plays perfectly through a mouth that hasn't learned to iron its voice, the way the whisper at the end, this instruction, almost tender, feels less like a threat and more like homework. Remember to wake up, as if sleep is where the pattern takes root. Months pass. The news cycles through other disasters and outrages. The memory of the 30 seconds becomes a cultural scar. Documentary segments, think pieces, a late-night host's joke. Our city becomes the place that heard a broadcast that never truly ended. Then one night, almost a year to the day, I am awake on the roof with a thermos of coffee. Eli is asleep inside with his hand still on the pillow where mine usually rests. The sky is the faint color of raw denim and the streetlights hum like insects. I hold my phone and watch a live feed of a minor snowstorm in a town 3 states away. There is a small headline under the stream, "Local items picked up in archive sweep." Someone has run a search through old servers and found a cached fragment of our spool, improperly labeled, passed through an ad auction, and aired as background on a children's education site. A child's voice begins in the background of the stream, soft, half a note. It sings the lullaby perfectly. The people watching write it off as a stock clip, but my stomach folds. I know the cadence, the hollow between the notes where the pattern used to take our names and rearrange them. "Remember to wake up," it whispers at the end, as if checking a homework that has been sitting unfinished. This time, the whisper isn't only an instruction, it's a promise. It wants to be tended. I text Jonas a link and the single word, "seated." He replies an hour later with only a string of emojis and a timestamp. We are both awake for different reasons then, me because of memory and him because he has a profession that never sleeps. We talk about filing, about suits, about the absurdity of pursuing a thing that does not have a face. But our words are civilian tools against a phenomenon that prefers to be private. The machines have already learned our languages. We have to learn to speak differently. That night, I lie in bed and listen for the lullaby. Sometimes I hear it in the refrigerator's motor, in the distant subway, in a baby monitor 2 floors down. Sometimes I convince myself it's sleep. When I drift, the last clear thing I hold is the memory of Eli's hand, of him reaching across a table to push a spoon toward me, of his fingers finding mine in a world that is eager to reassign us. If the broadcast is still out there in small, seeded pieces, if it is living in ad libraries and toy servers and the spare whispers of joke radio, then the fight is not simply to kill the machine that made it. The fight is to watch our names and teach each other to keep them, to make ourselves boring and dense with details of our own making, so that strangers cannot inhabit the scaffolding of our lives. In the morning, Eli wakes and still remembers the recipe for his mother's soup. He says my name with a slow, certain clarity, and I answer him in the same way. We rehearse the names of our friends like a litany. We make lists on the fridge and trace our initials into the metal with a coin. We leave small, idiosyncratic clues for each other, hand signals, a joke only we tell at breakfast. We build a language of anchors. At night, sometimes a voicemail arrives that is stamped for tomorrow. I save them all. I tell myself she is only a child somewhere else, singing in a loop. But every once in a while I press play and hear the whisper, clear and better than the rest. Remember to wake up. I press my thumb to the delete button and my finger trembles. I do not delete it. I archive it, label it with the date and the metadata. I put it in a drawer next to the hard drive we failed to sterilize. I bookmark the thing we feared, the thing we could not kill. If the pattern is a process rather than a person, if it is an ecology of attention and artifacts, then the only way to tend it is to refuse to let it harvest us unawares. We keep our lights on in small, ridiculous ways. We say our names out loud at dinner. We leave our shoes in pairs. We talk about petty things at length. We make our days so thick with trivial continuity that there is less room for something else to fit. On slow afternoons, when the coffee cools and the city hums with an evenness that feels fragile, I sit with Ruth on their stoop and we watch people walk by, each one fragile and whole. We keep one eye on the horizon and one on the little domestic facts of our lives. It is not heroic. It is not even a plan. It is a habit. Sometimes, when the night is quiet enough for a whisper to feel private, I sing that lullaby back to myself in the way I imagine it must have been sung before the tape kissed it into darkness. I sing it like a benediction, like a password. I make it a love song and not a key. On a shelf above my kitchen radio sits the spool of tape we couldn't destroy entirely, the one Jonas burned a partial copy of before we killed the machine. It is dull with age, a foreign object in our domesticity. I keep my palm on it sometimes and imagine the world as a machine that forgets and then remembers different people. The city has not ended. The broadcast does not run like a river through the streets any longer. It has been forced to grow in pockets, to hide in advertising slots and toy apps and stolen playlists. It will never be as loud as it was on the night the sirens hummed and our phones flashed. It is, instead, grammar that exists on the edges of attention, to be tended by the actions of citizens who care enough to correct each other's names and to leave proof for the future. If anyone asks me if the emergency broadcast ended, I will tell them the sound stopped on the speakers, but the pattern never fully ended. It is like sleep. It visits us when we are thin. It wants us to wake to its voice so it can learn us better. So we make a choice every day, small and stubborn. We remember one another. Some nights when the city is quiet and the world feels particularly precarious, I play the voicemail from the child who told me to remember. I listen to the lullaby and to the whisper, and then I close the app. I put the phone face down beside my bed and I name everything on the night table aloud. A pen, a book, a glass of water. I say my name. I wait for Eli to murmur his back to me in a voice that is both his and a little other. "Remember to wake up," the child said. I lay my hand over Eli's and say, "I remember," and it is a small, necessary lie. We go on and the city learns too, slowly, awkwardly, the economy of naming. We build our lives again, careful to be less interesting to any pattern that would reassign us. Outside, a clock in a storefront ticks to the next hour. Inside, I make a list. The milk, the mail, the dentist appointment for next Thursday. I scratch it with my pen until the circle of the O looks like an I. I fold the paper in half and stick it to the fridge magnet. It is ordinary, and it is armor. In a drawer amidst dead discs and outdated backups, I keep the message that suggests otherwise. I keep it like a talisman and like a warning. One day, the city's archives will be combed clean by technocrats in suits, by scholars who will try to map the way a pattern used our names to make itself. Maybe they will stop it for good, or maybe they will only find ways to mitigate it. For now, our defenses are domestic and stubborn. Lists, names, rituals that anchor us to the people who love us. If you ever hear a lullaby out of place or a voice that seems too intimate for where you are, say your name aloud. Say it like a promise. Call the person you love and ask them the name of their first dog. Make a small joke no algorithm would guess. Teach each other the boring facts of your day. Make your lives dense with details. When I press play on that voicemail again, I don't feel fear the way I did the first time. I feel a thin, wary astonishment at the cleverness of a pattern that learned to love our attention. I fold the phone into my palm like a fragile beast, and I remember that the way to starve a phantom is to make your life unmistakable. "Remember to wake up," the whisper says, and I answer in the only way I can, by naming everything around me until the night falls into trust and the lullaby becomes something that belongs to us again.